I'm representing the Parton and Owens family today, announcing the passing of my Aunt Dolly Rebecca Parton Dean, sister, sis, Aunt Granny to one generation, and Gigi to the next.
Dolly Parton has now become the focus of a remarkable national tribute, with American flags lowered to half-mast as the country mourns the passing of one of the most recognizable and beloved figures in music history. At the age of 80, Dolly's death has left fans, fellow musicians, entertainers, and millions of people around the world trying to process the loss of an artist whose influence reached far beyond country music. According to the family announcement referenced in the report, Dolly Rebecca Parton Dean passed away in Nashville following a brief battle with cancer, bringing an emotional chapter to the life of a woman who spent decades turning personal experiences, humble beginnings, and powerful emotions into songs that became part of people's lives. But the scenes surrounding her passing have revealed just how extraordinary her impact really was, because this is not simply a farewell to a singer. The lowering of flags, the flowers, the public tributes, and the words coming from some of the biggest names in entertainment all point towards something much larger. A national moment of remembrance for a woman who somehow managed to make people from completely different backgrounds feel that her music belonged to them. Dolly Parton was born into a large family of 12 children and grew up in what she described as a very poor mountain household, living on a farm in a simple one-room cabin near the Little Pigeon River. Her childhood could not have seemed further removed from the world of international fame she would eventually enter, yet those early years became one of the most important sources of inspiration for her songwriting. Dolly once recalled being around 10 years old when an uncle encouraged her singing and continued bringing her back to perform, giving a young girl from the mountains a glimpse of a future she could barely imagine. Even at that age, she reportedly looked toward her uncle and confidently wondered whether she was destined to become a star. That dream would eventually become reality, but the path there was not simple. By the time she received her major television opportunity in 1967, she was already an accomplished Nashville songwriter at just 21 years old, and it quickly became clear that Dolly was not going to fit neatly into the role others expected of a young country performer. She created an instantly recognizable image, complete with glamorous clothes, carefully styled hair, and an unmistakable sense of humor, but behind the larger-than-life appearance was a deeply serious songwriter who understood exactly what she was doing. Dolly knew that people sometimes laughed at her appearance and treated her image as a joke, but she never seemed confused about where the real power was. The persona was something she controlled, while the stories inside her music came from a much more personal place. That contrast became one of the most fascinating parts of her career. On the surface was the sparkling entertainer everyone recognized, while underneath was a songwriter drawing from heartbreak, family, poverty, ambition, love, insecurity, and the complicated emotions of ordinary life. Two of her most famous songs, Jolene and I Will Always Love You, were written on the same day and were connected to experiences from her own life, demonstrating how closely Dolly's art could be tied to reality. Yet there were also parts of her life that she deliberately kept away from the public, particularly her relationship with her husband Carl, showing that even someone as famous as Dolly understood the value of keeping certain parts of life private. As the years passed, her career expanded far beyond the traditional boundaries of country music. During the 1970s and 1980s, she became a major recording artist while also entering movies, television production, business, and entertainment ventures that helped turn her name into an international brand. She did not remain confined to one stage or one audience. Her music reached people who might never have considered themselves country fans, while her personality allowed her to cross cultural and social boundaries in a way very few performers ever managed. Then came Dollywood, a massive extension of her creative and business vision, and another example of how Dolly Parton repeatedly turned ideas into lasting institutions. But perhaps one of the most meaningful parts of her legacy had nothing to do with chart positions, movie roles, or entertainment businesses. Dolly's commitment to children and literacy became one of the defining elements of her public life. Inspired in part by her father, who did not have the opportunity to learn to read, her literacy initiative distributed hundreds of millions of books to children, bringing reading materials into the lives of young people who might otherwise have had limited access. That effort helped change the way people viewed Dolly. She was no longer simply a country singer with famous songs. She had become a philanthropist whose influence extended into the lives of families and children far beyond the entertainment industry. That is why the reaction to her death has been so emotional. The tributes have not focused only on her voice or her songwriting. They have repeatedly mentioned her kindness, generosity, humor, intelligence, and ability to make people feel welcome. One tribute described her as someone who was appreciated around the world, someone known by a single name and loved across boundaries that often divide society. Her audience was not limited by politics, class, gender, religion, or musical taste. Dolly somehow built a connection that seemed to ignore those divisions entirely. That rare ability may help explain why the lowering of American flags has carried such powerful symbolism for many people. It is a visual reminder that her passing is being treated as more than the departure of another famous performer. It is a moment to recognize the scale of a life that touched millions. The response from other major stars has only intensified that feeling. Sir Paul McCartney remembered Dolly's songwriting, singing, and philanthropy as extraordinary, while Oprah Winfrey reflected on the light Dolly brought into the world. Sir Elton John described her as an artist who could never simply be replaced, while Beyoncé praised her individuality, talent, generosity, humor, and entrepreneurial spirit. These reactions reveal something important about Dolly's legacy. People were not only mourning a performer whose songs they loved, they were mourning someone whose personality had become part of the cultural landscape. For many fans, Dolly had been present for decades through records, radio, television, films, interviews, concerts, charitable work, and countless memories connected to her music. And perhaps one of the most moving reflections came from musician Ricky Ross, who had the opportunity to interview Dolly about her life and music. He remembered her as welcoming and honest. But he also emphasized something Dolly herself never seemed to lose sight of: her identity as a songwriter. That detail matters because it is easy to become distracted by the image of Dolly Parton, the wigs, the glamour, the jokes, the famous personality, and the larger-than-life public character. But beneath all of it was the writing. The songs were the foundation. Ricky Ross recalled seeing Dolly perform in Glasgow around 2 decades earlier, surrounded by extraordinary bluegrass musicians. Before the musicians eventually left the stage and Dolly remained alone with her guitar to perform "I Will Always Love You." For him, that moment became one of the greatest live musical experiences he had ever witnessed. It was a powerful reminder that when the spectacle disappeared, the songwriter was still there. Just Dolly, her voice, her guitar, and a song capable of filling an entire room with emotion. That is perhaps why the current tributes feel so personal to so many people. Dolly's greatest songs were never simply entertainment. They carried stories. Jolene captured fear, jealousy, vulnerability, and desperation in a way that almost anyone could understand, while "I Will Always Love You" transformed the complicated emotions of separation into something timeless. Coat of Many Colors drew from childhood memories and showed how a deeply personal story could become a universal one. Her music allowed listeners to recognize pieces of their own lives inside hers, and as her fame increased, that connection never seemed to disappear. Even as Dolly moved into Hollywood, business, television, philanthropy, and larger stages, she continued to present herself as someone who remembered where she came from. That humility became one of her most enduring qualities. Her childhood in the mountains was not erased by success. Instead, it became part of the foundation of the story she told through her music and public life. In the months surrounding the death of her husband Carl, Dolly also faced health concerns, and even then the public image she presented remained characteristically upbeat. She shared updates about her life with the same mixture of honesty and humor that had defined her for years. Behind that cheerful personality, however, was a disciplined and determined professional who understood her craft and protected her creative vision. Now with her own passing, those memories are being revisited in a very different light. The flags lowered across America have become part of that remembrance, while flowers and tributes continue to symbolize the affection people felt for her. The question now is not whether Dolly Parton left a legacy, because that answer is unmistakably yes. The deeper question is why that legacy feels so personal to people who never met her. Perhaps the answer lies in the way she combined extraordinary success with stories rooted in ordinary human experiences. She could become a global superstar without abandoning the little girl who once dreamed of becoming a singer. She could build major entertainment businesses while continuing to speak about the lessons of poverty and family. She could become one of the most recognizable women in the world while using her platform to encourage children to read. And she could make millions laugh while writing songs about some of life's most painful emotions. That combination is almost impossible to reproduce. Dolly Parton became a symbol of ambition without forgetting humility, success without forgetting generosity, and fame without losing the ability to connect with ordinary people. Her passing, therefore, represents more than the end of a career. It marks the closing of a remarkable life that began in a modest mountain home and eventually reached stages, screens, businesses, and communities around the world. As the flags remain lowered in tribute, the silence surrounding her absence may feel strange to generations who grew up hearing her voice. Yet her music will continue to speak in the only way great music can, through memory. A song like Jolene can still bring back a feeling. "I Will Always Love You" can still turn a room quiet. "Coat of Many Colors" can still remind listeners of family, childhood, and pride in where you came from. And the stories behind those songs ensure that Dolly's presence will not simply disappear because she is no longer here. The public farewell may mark the end of one chapter, but it cannot close the story she spent a lifetime writing. Dolly Parton came from humble beginnings, dreamed of becoming a star, became one of the world's most famous entertainers, and then used that fame to create music, opportunities, and charitable work that reached far beyond herself. Now, as America lowers its flags and the world reflects on her life, perhaps the most fitting tribute is not simply to remember how famous Dolly Parton became, but to remember what she did with that fame. She turned her childhood memories into songs, her personality into a bridge between people, her success into philanthropy, and her voice into something generations could carry with them. That is why this moment feels so much bigger than a celebrity farewell. It is the farewell to a woman whose name became almost synonymous with warmth, resilience, humor, music, and generosity. And when the flags eventually rise again, the tribute will not truly be over, because Dolly Parton's greatest legacy was never something that could be lowered or raised with a flag. It lives in the songs, the stories, the children who received books, the artists she inspired, and the millions of people who found comfort, joy, or courage in her work. Dolly Parton may have taken her final bow, but the voice she gave to so many stories is not going silent. It will continue through every generation that discovers her music, hears her songs for the first time, and asks the same question that a young Dolly once asked her uncle when she dreamed of becoming a star. The remarkable part is that she did not simply become one. She became someone the world will remember long after the spotlight has faded.